Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another Get Geekish podcast. I'm Bino, joined by Derek over there. We're going to talk about some more stuff this week. Like we do, we talk about everything that we get geekish about, fandoms, nerd stuff, things going on in the world. And just a few days ago, Derek sent me a link for a tabletop-size Galaga video game display. And it was on super sale, but it was already sold out by the time I got the link.
Which is a shame.
It is, because he sent that to me. Galaga's my jam, all right? I don't know why, but ever since I was a small child, shooting those little Space Invader-esque ships and hitting that button as fast as you can, 40 years of my life, I have always seen that game and wanted to play. And I used to get pretty good at it. I was not like, championship material, but a lot of my growing up with these arcade games would be we'd go visit malls. This is the mid to late 80s, and my mom would say, all right, we're gonna go drive to the mall in Westminster, or we're gonna go drive to the mall in Fort Collins, or we're gonna go drive to the mall in whatever, an hour and a half drive away to get to the mall. She would go wander around and look for shopping, and then I'd get to go to the arcade. So I'd get between $1 and $2 to last an hour or two at the arcade. And so what did you do? You either pumped quarters in the machine, played for 2 minutes, and then just wandered around staring at people longingly while they played for 2 hours, or you found a game you could get good at, and you could make a quarter last for 20 or 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did with Galaga.
Well, it's funny, too, because, first of all, going to a mall to the arcade is such a foreign concept these days. I don't even think do malls have arcades anymore? Some probably do.
A few of them do. But they're not near what they were long ago.
No, and the thing is, too, is so my arcade days were at the bowling alley. My parents used to be part of a bowling league, and they would go bowling, and then they'd do the same. They'd give me $5 and go, hey, we're going to be bowling for 2 hours. Go keep yourself entertained. I'm like, $5? So it became an art to find that game basically it's like when you go to Vegas now, you try to find the penny slots or the quarter slots and make them last, right? So it became an art to find that game that you could get good at. We all made mistakes. You see the Time Crisis arcade thing, and you're like, oh, and you're like, yeah. So you grab the gun and you pump in $1.50. And it's gone within
your life
2
for
minutes?
7 seconds.
Yeah, it's
all right. There's some bad guys going to pull you. Oh, do you want to continue? Put in $2 more.
Time Crisis is the fruit stripe of the arcade world. So, you learned real quick. The big flashy ones, not the way to go. Mortal Kombat, I think I could do 50 cents and play that for a good 20 minutes, just climbing up the ladder there. Or like you said, Galaga, you put in a quarter and you're good for a little bit, just sitting there mashing the buttons. It's funny and it's sad that times have changed so much that the youth of today will get to miss out on that. Mm-hmm. Because it's not, they have the arcade collections that you can get for Xbox and PlayStation. It's not the same.
No, it's not. And it's a bummer too, because it wasn't, like you said, it was a bowling alley arcade. The things were everywhere. They were there to entertain you. I remember the bowling. I had the same thing with the bowling alley, where there was always a break to go play some video games or pinball in the back at the bowling alley. Mm-hmm. Most family restaurants had game rooms where there were some arcade games in there. I remember going to Shakey's Pizza, and I could go play Super Mario Brothers or Galaga or Donkey Kong or something, get a couple bucks while you're waiting for food and things like that. Bars and restaurants, I was too young for this time, but they were, front rooms of those things too. Waiting areas in restaurants. If there was a waiting area before you got seated, there was generally a video game or two here and there, and they were just a cultural phenomenon. And it was, people enjoyed watching, because if somebody was really good, then within 20 minutes there'd be a crowd of 4 or 5 people standing there watching. Oh man, this person's really good at this. Well, look at that. Right. I've never got that far in Asteroids. And it was, this cultural phenomenon. And have you watched the High Score series on Netflix?
I have not, no. The only video game quote unquote documentary I've seen was The King of Kong, which was interesting.
Well, that documentary, I think I've watched 5 or 6 episodes now. It's really, really good. It's made by the same people that did A Great Big Story. They used to have the podcast called that. Mm-hmm. So they are amazing storytellers, and they get some really cool stuff about video game history. But there was an interesting scenario if they actually, one of the companies had figured out the mathematical formula for how long a player should play a game before they have to put in another quarter to get the amount of enjoyment versus feeling how much time it's worth versus how much money the game's making. And if I recall correctly, it was like a minute and 28 seconds or 2 minutes and 20 seconds or something was the ideal time of the turnover of for the arcades to make a lot of money and people going to the arcade to still feel like it was worth their time. So some of the games, why it explains in the late 90s and the late 80s and early 90s it got so horrible is because the games were being designed that, okay, you're going to need to put in a new quarter every 90 to 220 seconds, no matter what. Whereas some of the old games, the Pac Mans, the Galagas, and stuff like that, I think they had such a fun because people would play them ad nauseum until they got good. They'd memorize the patterns because they could just play it over and over and over and over and over again. And the games were then designed to like, no, we don't want somebody sitting at this arcade cabinet for 2 hours because that's 2 hours that it's not making any more money.
Right.
Which sucks.
Did you ever have the problem? So like this happened to me a couple times. Like when your family, your parents treat the family to going out to a restaurant, right? And you go up and they're like, oh, it's going to be a 30-minute wait. Okay. Your parents give you the quarters because they have the arcade machines up there, and it's usually that crappy one that has, a handful of games on it. And by crappy, I mean it's been used. The joystick's really loose, and the
you're
buttons
lucky
are
if the
worn.
button works every time.
Right. But you still put the quarter in, and you're sitting there playing, and all of a sudden they're like, we got a table ready. You're like, but I'm in the middle. I'm doing really well, and you have to go, and then like some little
parents didn't understand that. You're like, look,
right?
I can see the table. I'll come join you in 2 minutes. Like,
you're sitting over there. Okay, I'll be right here. Just give me
and parents used to get on my case for wasting money, and they never understood the fact. Well, you're like wasting money. I put a quarter in here. That's like throwing a quarter away if I don't finish this game.
It is funny because you're talking about, that documentary where they're saying basically like it's a slot machine thing of like, this isn't making money, so we need to up it. That was always one of the big heartbreaks as a kid. When you go in, especially at the bowling alley or the laser tag place, you're used to this game being this much, and the next thing you know, they raised it by a quarter. You're like, this used to be a quarter, now it's 50 cents to play? Why?
Yeah, games are always a quarter, except for the brand new spanking ones would be 50 cents. That was a big deal. Oh, this is an expensive game. Remember the big giant Afterburner game that came out? You actually go sit in the cockpit.
Oh yeah.
And they probably lost money on a lot of those, but it was like 50 cents or $1 to play that, and it was worth it though because the whole seat moved.
Well, and that was the thing too, because with the Cruising USA and Cruising World games, you're sitting in the chair and you're sitting there driving. When that first came out, I'm pretty sure that was like 50 cents. And then I remember going to like a little laser tag lock-in because, oh man, those were the days. Going to a laser tag lock-in, you're just surrounded by an arcade
all
with
night
unlimited
long.
play. Yep, unlimited play, and then you have the laser tag too. It got to the point where I didn't give a crap about going to play laser tag. I just wanted to play the arcade games because they were free play. But it was even still like, even just going in there randomly for just a day, like somebody's birthday party, seeing that dollar raise on that Cruising USA game, you're like, guys, now I want to play this game, but now I can't. And all your friends whose parents gave them like $20 to play, and your parents gave you $5, they're like, let's go play this Cruising World game. And you're like, no, I'm all right.
I'm gonna go play Donkey Kong.
I don't want to, but will.
And it's interesting because a lot of places have taken advantage of that now. You look at the Dave and Buster's style of places, and they still hurt my brain so because the games are still developed to go as quick as you can through credit, but you pay with credit, so you never know how much you're spending.
Right.
Or you can slide that stupid card through Dave and Buster's and blow through $30 or $40 in 5 minutes. But what just happened? I don't know what happened.
So what? The last time we were there was like my bachelor party, right?
Yep, that's how cool we are.
Yeah, I think that was the last time I was actually in an arcade too, and like that was my first time at Dave and Buster's, and it is one of those weird things. I mean, because now it's like any arcade you go to, any laser tag place, whatever, it's you load this card up. Maybe it's going to teach the kids how to use a debit card. I don't know. I don't know the whole reason behind it. Maybe they got tired of the coins jamming the machines. I don't know. All I know is, one, like you said, you blow through it real quick. Two, that takes the fun out of walking up to other machines and checking the coin slot and see if quarters went through or tokens went through. Because I got to play so many games that way.
Or slapping your quarter up on top of the little, the top of the arcade box to claim you're next in a fighting game or something. Like, oh, my quarter's up here. Like, it's my spot. I'll sit back here and watch.
I never got that pleasure. I saw that in movies, but it's never happened to me in real life. Because when I went to go play at the bowling alley with my parents bowling, I was damn near the only kid there.
That's probably a little bit because just the few extra years I have on you was, I think, the very, very height of the arcade phenomenon with the groups going to places for it. So I probably have just a little bit more of that. Because I remember with Mortal Kombat, at that with Street Fighter, it came out. When those games came out, the one in the mall where I grew up, they actually had 2 of the Street Fighter 2 arcade boxes, and for like 6 months, you had to wait 4 or 5 turns to get a chance to play. But then there was always some like high school kid that was unfreaking beatable, so he'd just be getting free game after free game, because if you win, you get to play the next game for free, and then everyone else is just dumping quarters to fight against him. And there's a lot of almost fights at those arcades.
That's another joy, though. That was another huge joy. If, especially in like the cruising games or any race game, basically, is you get first place, you get a race again. Mm-hmm. So it was always like a lot of fun to do that. And if you didn't, you're like, I had fun. But then they started raising the price, and it was one of those ones where I'm like, I want to play these newer games. Like, I loved Time Crisis, but I never made it very far in that game. As a kid, no. What was it? A while back, me and my buddy went to the pinball place in Fort Collins, and they had Time Crisis in there. And I think we did unlimited play, where it was like free play. You just pay like $10 and you can play all the arcade games as long as you want. And they had Time Crisis in there. We finally beat the game, but it took so many continues. And I'm sitting there trying to add up the math. I'm like, this is like $1. So it's $1.50 to start, and then like $1 to continue. I'm like, as many times as we continued, we could have bought this game outright.
Mm-hmm. You think how people actually did that stuff in the arcades at a point? Because the only time I ever got to play those type of games, I remember House of the Dead was one for me like that.
That was so much fun.
I like that one a whole lot. But if you could last more than a minute or two in the game, you were doing really, really good. But there was a lot of levels in that game. And there were 2 places. I remember down in Denver, there was a Boardwalk USA, which was awesome. You'd pay like $20, and it was the biggest arcade you'd ever seen, and everything was free play. So there's no putting quarters in anything. Everything was free play, so you just went with your card, and you could play whatever game you wanted as long as you wanted during your time frame. And there was another place in Longmont that they bought an old furniture store. Upstairs was pool tables. Downstairs was arcade games. Not brand new ones. They all were at least a few years older ones. But you paid $5, and that gave you 2 hours or 4 hours of unlimited play, whatever you want. So we beat House of the Dead one time, and I did the exact same thing. I'm counting the math up. Like, if this had been in a real arcade, we just would have dropped like $117 to beat this game.
Well, what's funny, too, is with House of the Dead or with Time Crisis and other, like the Lethal Enforcers, Area 51, the different shooting games like that, if you were playing with a friend and the friend didn't do as well as you or vice versa, that person who did well got a free game, got to continue, and the person who didn't had to continue and put the quarters in. And that was always funny, because like sometimes you're sitting there playing with friends and you're having fun, and then like you get to the next level and they're like, "Can I borrow some quarters? I can't go." And you're like, "This is all my money, man." So you had to make a choice.
The sound of that change machine, that little brownish tan change machine with the orange light. You slide your dollar in about 17 times before it catches it right, and then
sitting there like straightening out the dollar. It was always funny too, because you're sitting there, if you're in the middle of a game and you can hear people doing that, and then you hear somebody put in like a tenner, and you just hear the ching 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 ching. Like, oh, they're ready to play. Like you get all serious. Like, oh,
whoa,
that person's
is that
ready.
Like a pro?
Yeah. No, my parents just love me a lot. They want me to wait.
So I was looking through some of the lists of some of the most popular arcade games of the time, and I started with the 80s games, and my favorite Galaga was at the top, thankfully. Which, forgot my other video game hangout was the roller rink.
Oh yes,
heck of an arcade there. But they also included Pac Man, Space Invaders, Miss Pac Man, Donkey Kong, Frogger, 1942, which I loved that game for some reason.
Dude, I forgot about that game.
Mm-hmm. Asteroids, Outrun, Tetris, Street Fighter, Dragon's Lair, Battlezone, Dig Dug, Pole Position, Afterburner, Gauntlet, Centipede. Some of the top of the list was the most popular 80s one.
I loved Centipede, and I don't know why. Like, the game it's pretty basic. I mean, it's basically kind of like an Asteroids ripoff, but it was a lot of fun.
So for some reason, I didn't like Centipede that much. I hated the ball controller. Centipede had it, Missile Command had it, a few other games, where it was just it looked like a billiard ball in the center of the arcade console, and you just had to roll it around to do stuff with it. I did not like those controllers.
Playing golf like that, too.
Mm-hmm. And they had those little triangle buttons with the red tiny one at the top, so it looked like it was part of a plane cockpit, but you couldn't mash it. You had to, like, just touch the end of it. I don't know why. That was just...
Oh, man.
And
what was funny, too, is a lot of those 80s games you played, and then they made it well, like arcade. I'm assuming arcade cabinets were, I know they were expensive because there was times where I looked into getting them. But back then, these businesses didn't want to drop $500 to $1,000 on a new arcade cabinet, so they kept going for the cheap ones that probably once a month you'd go in and have an out-of-order thing on it because the quarter machine wasn't working or something like that. So they had to, like, tweak it a little bit.
Well, it was an art form because kids did not treat those things well. So the people that actually ran arcades, you look at the character in Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, the people that loved their arcades, they took care of their machines and they kept them okay. Whereas a lot of other places, it was every time you went in, half of them were broken. Yeah. Because no one knew how to fix them. But they took a little TLC once people are sitting there kicking them and shoving each other and banging the things when they don't get something right. And
It was always bad, too, when you go up to one and you go to either grab the joystick or hit the buttons and they're sticky. You're like, I gotta play this now. I put a quarter in.
Because there are also a lot of times roller rinks, malls, bowling alleys, so people would have their plate of nachos, their soda, their slice of pizza that they'd be sitting on top of the games everywhere going on, too. Mm-hmm. And the arcades and the malls always had a no food or drink rule.
Yeah. But
they never really enforced it all that well.
No, not at all.
And I like some of the big multiplayer cabinets. I really jazzed out because the Ninja Turtles had the 4-player cabinets. Mm-hmm. Simpsons had the 4-player cabinets. X-Men had that 8-player cabinet. Dude, or was it 6? 6 or 8? There was a lot of people put on there.
The Simpsons and the X-Men one and the Ninja Turtle one, actually all together, I wasted a lot of quarters on those ones. And then there was Golden Axe.
Oh, Golden Axe was my jam. I loved that Golden Axe.
For whatever reason, I always loved that game, and even though that was a quarter eater too, it was just.
Yeah, but I think you may have already hit on that point with Golden Axe. You're probably the exact same way. Once you got decent at it, you could make that quarter last 5 or 6, 10 minutes pretty easily because you get through those first 4 or 5 levels without even getting hit before you even have to fight something that's tough.
I mean, it's the game of repetition. Basically how some games are now on console. It's just they're not eating quarters. So back in Golden Axe, you're sitting there putting a quarter in. Oh, I died. Quarter in. Oh, I died. But then you could just go, okay, so I know what's going to happen. Here comes the big boss. Let's save all our magic items for that and just start spamming them and hitting them and everything like that. That was oh man, take me back.
Mm-hmm. You had to kick the little elves to get your health potions back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, which character did you choose in Golden Axe? I have a guess that who you were.
Well, so for a while there, I chose the little dwarf. I don't know why. Because probably in my mind he had a smaller hitbox. I don't know. But then I went after the girl. What was her name?
Oh, well, I was wrong. I figured you would have been the blue loincloth dude.
No. For some reason, I chose the dwarf because I liked his axe. But then, I started going, was she Amazonian? I don't know.
Yeah. I'll look up her name.
The girl.
Yeah.
The girl when I, became a little bit older.
Tyrus Flair.
Yeah, for reasons.
Guileless Thunderhead. Well, see, when I chose characters in those video fighting games, I almost always, when I first started out, I picked the smallest, like the tankiest looking like dwarfs type things, or the female characters. And it wasn't always just because they were built to be very, we'll say, voluptuous, more so than humans can actually be.
What their armor protects, we'll never know. But
because in those early 80s games, a lot of them didn't even look like real people anyway, so it wasn't quite that thing. But for some reason, I like being the characters that weren't the same. I didn't want to be the character everybody else was. When I played Street Fighter, Ken and Ryu were the two characters that I picked last because everybody was them. I didn't want to be them. Everybody was them. I wanted to be the characters that, like I don't know what it is about because I always, with Street Fighter, I was always Blanca or Chun-Li or E Honda. When it was Final Fight, it was Hager. When it was Golden Axe, it was always the Dwarf. Like those were my go-tos for some reason.
Well, what's funny is like when you'd play. I had Mortal Kombat on the Sega Genesis 1 and 2. And then they would get Mortal Kombat in the cabinets in the arcade, and the moves are basically the same. So you could kind of feel like kind of a pro when you're sitting there, I'm choosing Sub-Zero, I'm going down forward punch and freezing people. And then I remember a couple times where I was watching somebody and they were doing, they did a fatality. And I was like, whoa, you can do fatalities on the cabinets? Mm-hmm. What? So then you start learning those. And this was before the internet, this was before you could Google something. So you're sitting there having to figure out just button mashing to figure out moves.
Hands in the air if you ever had a little tiny pocket-sized spiral notebook that you wrote down moves that you'd bring with you to the arcade to pull out and look.
I did have one, but I never took it to the arcade. No, that's something I did not do. But one of the best arcade moments that I could look back at now, but at the time I was very just mad about it, was my cousin and I, so my grandma took us to the Greeley Mall, and there's an arcade in there, and we went to go play Cruisin' World. And we ran to the thing because we were just going to race each other. And I was like, I want this seat. And I was like, no, I want this seat. Because she was going to choose that one. The whole kid mentality of no, wait, I want that one. So I sat down in that seat. She sat down in the seat that I was originally going to do. And she reached down to move the seat forward. And there was a $20 bill there. And she found $20. And I was like, that could have been mine. And she was like, oh, I found $20. And of course, my grandma didn't make her split it with me because, why would she? But
finders keepers.
I know. I was like, that could have been mine. So that's one of my arcade memories, because I was sitting there the whole day. I was just bitter because I was like, look at all the games I could have played with that. Mm-hmm. Not save it, but the games I could have played. Plus, back then I was a huge claw machine junkie.
Did you actually ever win anything from a claw machine?
Dude, I did. I used to be so good at those. And then nowadays, I'm pretty sure that they loosened the claw quite a bit. But
you could have picked something up and you're like, oh, look, I'm going to win this machine. Look, I've got it. Here you go.
Yeah. I got pretty well to the point where at the bowling alley, old ladies would give me some money to go win them something. And I usually would come back with something after spending $2. So I got pretty good at it at the bowling alley. But I don't think I have that skill anymore, sadly. But
it's rigged.
Yeah. Nowadays, I'm pretty sure they are.
I tell you, in the 90s, when games got a little bit better with graphics, some of my favorite moments were spending in the arcade playing NBA Jam and NBA Blitz or NFL Blitz.
He's on fire! Oh, dude, NFL Blitz was so stupid but fun. Just doing wrestling moves on the other team.
Every play, it looks like somebody's injured.
Right. How is he still playing? I just jumped on his back.
And NBA Jam, so many one-liners came from that. Oh, you get all the code. That was another one. You get all the codes. You can do things. You get their big heads or have other weird characters show up on them.
Dude, the only reason to put in a cheat code was to get the big heads because it was just so goofy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
And I can still hear some of those sounds, like when you're doing little defense and you hand it.
Yep. The little what 16-bit squeaks that they have from their shoes.
And then fighting games started going into a thing because I feel like I don't want to say a purist, but I love the old fighting games where it was just one-on-one fighting, because the new ones, even like Super Smash Brothers and some of the other stuff, there's at times why are there 9 characters on the screen right now? This is a one-on-one fight. What's happening? But I think the Marvel versus Capcom started doing that when you had to have the 2 different characters, and your 2 characters would have to defeat the other 2 characters, but then there'd be other ones that would come in and help sometimes. And they started making all these super.
Like that? Aren't you a fan of Marvel vs. Capcom?
Like I said, I do like the game. I still like Smash Brothers too, but I would prefer it if it was just a one-on-one actual fight. Because it like when you have all this other stuff going on, I feel like it takes away some of the magic of the actual fight thing. You're like, oh look, that guy's gonna shoot with a laser that fills the entire screen. Cool, I win. Like,
what was it? Was it Virtual Fighter and Tekken in like the mid '90s? Started doing the arcade cabinets, and that was a lot of fun. Virtual Fighter with their blocky 3D models, and when Tekken came out, I was like, oh my god, look at the graphics on this thing.
Yeah, they were fun, but I did not like those.
They were slower.
Yeah, they were slower, and the 3D, like the concept was cool, but I just preferred a 2D fighter where they would just fight because the 3D graphics just it wasn't quite right, and it just seemed like it held them down. I still played the heck out of them, but it was everyone got all like in my high school. Killer Instinct was like the cool game to play, and I didn't care for Killer Instinct. Okay, whatever, sweet, yeah, it's Killer Instinct, it's a fighting game.
But you could be a werewolf.
I know. A quarter muncher that I don't think I ever got to beat. Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
With the gun?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
All the games with the guns. I mean, yeah, Terminator 2 with the gun. You talked about Lethal Enforcers and Area 51. God, there was an old 80s one that was...
There was a helicopter one, too.
Choplifter?
I don't remember. Yeah, you go up and you had the two, and you're sitting there like pointing at the screen and you're moving it like this. You're like, oh, I'm doing so well. And then it's like game over. You're like, I thought I was doing so well.
Mm. And I didn't love wrestling, but I did like the characters in 80s wrestling. And the WWF WrestleMania arcade game was so much fun.
So much fun. It was. I think that was like the perfection of wrestling games.
Uh-huh.
Like they've come out with some ones, but that one I think was by far the best. And the thing is like there was always so many choices, and it sucked too because like if you go on a busy Saturday, like your parents are like, we're gonna go practice bowling on Saturday morning or whatever, and there's kids in there, you're like, I guess I mean, there's Donkey Kong. I mean, there was always that one game that you didn't really care to play.
But you would because there wasn't a line.
Right. So, like, Burger Time was one of them. I was just like, it's there.
Well, it seems like almost all the old games were like that because, you know, when you're talking mid-'90s, a lot of the games out there, the Burger Times, the Tappers, the Centipede, the Galagas, those are games that were 15 years old. So they were, like, not cool. Like, they were old games. They're, you know, why would anybody play those ones? What's one of the most underrated games that you loved that was in the arcade cabinet that it seemed like nobody else played but you couldn't get enough of?
Oof. Oh, man. I don't know. Like, the thing is, like, I can think of a whole bunch of them that I played the heck out of. I know that there was a motorcycle game where you sat on the bike that didn't seem like a lot of people played it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun to me.
It's like Enduro Racer or something like that?
Something, I don't remember. There was a wave racing game like that too. But honestly, at the one that I went to, not a lot of people played Golden Axe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those ones where I could always pick that one up and start slashing skeletons and whatnot in it. But I know that there's some. And then what's funny too is that bowling alley eventually did like they still had the arcade, but then they did like a virtual golf room.
Mm-hmm.
Where you could just hit it at the screen. You know, when that became popular, it's like golf indoors and you virtual thing. I didn't do that, but I would go in there every once in a while because they had one of those. You sit up on like the little bar thing, and they have those little TV screens that are like this big, and you could choose different card games. And for some reason, I got into cards in that game, and I remember I felt like a secret agent or something at one time because I was like 13. I went in there and I found a card game that if you play it, like. It's almost like strip poker, but it was like solitaire. And like the girl was on the screen, like she'd go down to her bikini. That's about it. But I was like, what is this game?
Was that like Leisure Suit Larry's Book of Cards or something like that?
I don't remember what it was, dude. But I was sitting here playing this and I didn't even realize it because I didn't think anything of it. And I'm sitting there, that's happening. I was like, am I supposed to be in here? What? I like cards now. But I don't know. There was a lot of old school games that I felt like didn't get enough love once the 90s came about because everybody was about the, you know, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it because I do like the hyper violent games where you're sitting there like, oh, but.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, a lot of the stuff, we're so into the graphics that I wanted the game to be fun. Cool graphics are neat, but I wanted to have a game that I could play and enjoy for 20 minutes rather than play a game. Oh, these graphics are sick, and my game's over.
What was it? Airwolf? No, that's not it. There was a helicopter game, kind of like 1942, where it was over the top, and it was over the jungles.
Tiger Heli?
Was that it?
That was on Nintendo. I don't know if it was an arcade game or not.
There was an arcade game kind of like that, though, where you're sitting there, kind of like 1942, where you're sitting there with a helicopter and you could get different upgrades and different things. It was like Contra, but in a helicopter.
Vertical,
top down, which was a lot of fun, and I don't think a lot of people played that one. So.
Yeah, I had the same. Raiden was one of my favorite games like that, too. It was a spaceship, same concept.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Because I think there's like a version of the Raiden one that was like
I think that game, you could take that concept, and there was probably 30 or 40 of different ones with slightly different graphics. One of my unknown favorites was Heavy Barrel. No one ever wanted to play Heavy Barrel, and the graphics were mediocre at best, but all you went around and you just shot bad guys, and you collected all the pieces, and if you collected all the pieces of the big gun, then you had this like gargantuan 30 seconds of just destroy everything on the screen, and that game, for some reason, I got hours of it. And the other one that I couldn't get enough of was Iron Man's Off-Road Challenge. It was a pickup truck racing game. So you get in the arcade, and there'd be three. There was a red, yellow, and a blue with the steering wheels. And then you take these little trucks and you race around and get all things. And the other one, if you won, you got to keep going for free. So if you got good at it, you could make a quarter last half an hour if you played against a bunch of people you could win races on.
Was it just me, or were those steering wheels hard to turn for that one? Right?
Oh, they were, and it was part of the game because it was one of the first ones that actually had the haptic reinforcement. So when you were trying to turn, if you were trying to turn going really fast or were you in the rut, it actually made choked a gear down, so you had to really push into it. And
oh my God! So I remember doing that, and I remember one time grabbing. Blue was my favorite color as a kid, so I remember going to blue at one point and driving. I'm like, wait, this is too loose. This doesn't feel right because they had broken it. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, all right, I'll go to red.
So you weren't the only one, because every time a different place had one of those, at the Timeout arcade in the mall, I always wanted the red car because the red car was faster. The bowling alley, the yellow one was faster, but at the Family Fun Center, the blue car was faster. So that's what I always tried for. And I had it in my head that they went there and tweaked, and they probably put it so that this car is a little faster in this one.
Yeah. Okay. Those I'll say those racing games, the Cruising World, Cruising USA, the Monster Truck one, everything like that, those helped us become better drivers.
Yeah, sure. I'll go with that.
The whole I'm going to do manual, and you're just sitting there trying to shift. You're like, never mind, this sucks.
All right, so what game do you think, this is according to usgamer.net, was the highest grossing arcade games of all time?
It's got to be Pac Man, right? Pac Man or Donkey Kong?
Let's see. Number one. Pac Man, number one.
Yeah.
Sold 400,000 units, and if you adjust for inflation, that arcade cabinet made $7.5 billion in the arcade.
Jeez.
$7.5 billion from one quarter at a time.
I want to know how much Time Crisis made, because they came out with Time Crisis, then Time Crisis 2, and then a different version of Time Crisis 2. And the same with Area 51. They did Area 51, and then they did kind of a different version of that one. Area 51 I spent a lot of time with. I loved that game. A lot of people didn't because it was so cheesy, but it was fun.
I think it was interesting with that game too. Well, not that game specifically, but in general, I was reading about some of the numbers, and a lot of the numbers are kind of fudged for arcade games because they couldn't really track them specifically because it relied on, how much money the arcade operator said the games made. But when they did their reports, they also didn't differentiate. Street Fighter 2, for a lot of arcades, included Street Fighter 1, Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter 2 something else. Those would all count as Street Fighter 2. Same thing when they had 2 or 3 sequels. If they didn't keep very good records, oh yeah, Time Crisis, cool. You've got 4 different versions of it here. Oh yeah, they played Time Crisis. So there's a lot of those numbers that are kind of made up. Space Invaders number 2. Street Fighter 2 Championship Editions number 3. So Pac Man, $7.5 billion.
Right.
Street Fighter 2, which seemed like the biggest game of our generation, still only made $3.5 billion. So not even half of what Pac Man made.
It's because of the whole thing. You'd go in there and either people would be on Street Fighter, just, karate chopping their way through the ranks, and dropping 50 cents, or you got a quarter where you can play for a good 10 minutes before you get.
And to top it off, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man is at number 4 with another $2.5 billion of inflation-adjusted revenue. That was Pac-Man with a bow.
5.
Yep. NBA Jam, number 5. Defender, number 6. Asteroids, number 7. Mortal Kombat 2 is number 8. Mortal Kombat 1 is number 9. And Donkey Kong at number 10 with inflation-adjusted revenue of $686 million.
Dude, Mortal Kombat 2 was by far the superior fighting game, in my opinion. I mean, Street Fighter was fun, but arcade-wise, just for some reason, Mortal Kombat was my jam.
I enjoyed Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat 2 took the graphics level because I think Mortal Kombat 1, they were so focused on the motion capture that some of the gameplay was subpar.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat 2, they fixed some of that. The only thing I didn't like about Mortal Kombat 2 was it was so easy to have cheeseball cheats that if somebody just knew how to uppercut, but sweep, 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 uppercut, sweep, 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 okay, I win. Like, but
Dude, how do you think I spent so much time playing that game?
Cheater. You were that
good.
guy, huh?
No, I didn't play it like that against other people because they actually comboed me, and I'm like, how? How do you know this?
Yeah, those people start pulling off those 20 and 30 move combos. You're like, okay, that's possible.
I'm gonna go back to my Sega Genesis. One thing I'll say while we wrap this up, I always felt like a winner because, and I mentioned this before, I would always go around, be it the bowling alley arcade, any arcade I was at, and just check the coin slots, because there was always times where kids would put coins in, but I would always hit the coin return too, because sometimes the kids would like shove quarters in there and it gets stuck. So if you give it a good push or get hit. So there's one time I'm pretty sure I got like $2 in change because there was something I was like hit it and they just all fell out. I was like, sweet. Like you always felt like you're cheating the system. You're like, hey, and then you go waste it real quick on something else. But
yeah, because to us that was making money. The guy running the arcade was like, "You already spent your $2. I don't care. Right. as long as you put those quarters back in a machine, do whatever you want."
Right. Well, the thing is I always had to make sure that they weren't looking. Like.
Oh yeah, because if they caught you doing it, they did not appreciate you.
No.
Fingering their arcade machines.
Phrasing. And then the last thing is like when you go to the arcade, and that would you choose? So like if you actually went to an arcade that had the tickets. But they'd still have the machines where you could play them and it wouldn't give you tickets. Which one would you choose?
The tickets were so dumb. At an early age, all those prizes were absolutely worthless that I would have rather played a game for 5 minutes and walk away with a stupid stuffed gorilla or a kazoo.
See, the tickets still got me. I knew how dumb it was, but the tickets still got me. Because, usually when I'm going to those things, it was like a party and everybody else is like, look at all the tickets I have. I was like, well, I want tickets.
When you can get enough to actually win something, I can understand, because there's something psychological about that. You get this whole wad of, hey, I can trade these in for something. But it also, I feel like they did it wrong because so many of the arcades, like especially the smaller arcades, they had those cool prizes, but you had to have like 40,000 tickets for. So you're like, okay, so I'm going to come back here every weekend for like 3 years to win that. But I feel like the Chuck E. Cheese said a better thing because the tickets are more like a kazoo is still 50 tickets, but every time you play a game, you get 10 tickets. So you have this armload of stuff like, yeah, I'm awesome. I'm a winner.
It's so funny because Dave & Buster's went the route where the tickets are then on the card. So you don't have to carry those around anymore, right? But it's also the thing when you're a kid. I don't know about you, but you always go to your arcade or whatever, and there'd always be that one item, that big ticket item that you want, but you can tell it has layers of dust on it because nobody can save up their tickets to get that because they give up. I don't know if there's like a scooter or there was a TV or something. I don't remember. I know one was a boombox, but you could just see the layer of dust on it because nobody, for one, nobody saved
those
up their
prizes
tickets.
were not to give away.
No, nobody could save their tickets. For two, if you actually did the math, it would be cheaper to save your allowance and go buy one from the store rather than saving up all your tickets trying to win it from the thing. Mm-hmm. So, arcades scammed us early. They taught us life lessons.
They did. Make your money last. Don't buy the hype.
Right.
But what we do, we spent our money on the new games and got excited about the hype.
We still do. Still do.
That's a little trip down memory lane for the quarter-sucking arcade games of yesteryear. So if you went to arcades when you were a kid, or maybe you still go now, what is your favorite arcade game to play?
Especially,
where did all your quarters go?
Much. They've upped so much. Remember when we went to Dave & Buster's? They have Mario Kart 8 now. Mm-hmm. And you go up and it's like $2 to play. You're like, but I have it at home. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same because I'm not sitting in a seat driving like this.
And if you did play as a kid, and if you've listened this far, obviously you got kind of excited about that idea. Just do yourself a favor. Go on YouTube or go on Google and just search some of the old video games or arcade games from the decades you went. And you'll find lists and you'll see some gems that you probably played once or twice that are still hidden in your memory. Like, oh, I loved that game. I never thought I'd see that game again. It's a good thing to do. But let us know at Geekish on social media. What was your favorite quarter-sucking arcade game? And let's all have a conversation about it on the social. What do you think? All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us for here at the Geekish podcast, and we will talk at you next week. Nice.